right, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today we're diving into a pretty wild story. I mean, really out there.
Oh yeah, this one's a doozy.
From 9th century Rome. We're talking about the Cadaver Synod.
Or, as they called it in Latin, Synodus Horrenda.
The horrendous synod. Just to set the mood.
I mean, horrendous is really putting it lightly when you think about it.
Yeah, so just imagine Italy in the 9th century.
Total political instability.
Right, we're talking about a period where the papacy was basically a revolving door.
Oh yeah. All these powerful Roman factions constantly vying for control.
Trying to install their own pope.
Exactly. So between 872 and 965 AD, get this, over 24 different popes.
That is a lot of popes.
It is. And it gets even wilder. Think about this, between 896 and 904.
An 8-year span.
We're talking almost a new pope every single year.
Oh, wow.
Can you even imagine that level of turnover?
No, it's almost comical when you think about it.
I mean, if it weren't so steeped in intrigue and, violence.
Yeah, it's pretty serious stuff. So, in this whole mess, we meet our main character.
The star of our show, if you will.
Pope Formosus. Now, by the time this story really gets going, Formosus has been dead for about 7 months.
7 months.
Yeah.
Deceased.
But as you might have guessed from the title, his story, it doesn't end there.
Oh, no.
So what we're trying to figure out today is this whole crazy episode. Why was a dead pope dug up?
Yeah. Exhumed.
And put on trial?
Big question.
And what were the charges? I mean, what could they possibly accuse him of?
And then what happened after?
Right. What was the fallout of this whole bizarre spectacle?
Because let me tell you, the details are, well, pretty surprising.
To put it mildly, so to really get why this Cadaver Synod is so wild, we have to go back and look at Formosus' life.
Yeah, rewind a little bit.
So back in 864, Formosus became the bishop of Porto Santa Rufina.
Which, just so everyone knows, was a pretty important diocese near Rome.
It wasn't just any old bishopric.
Right, and he was apparently pretty good at his job.
It sounds like it, right? In 866, he was sent as a papal legate to Bulgaria.
Basically a representative of the Pope.
Right. Kind of like a papal ambassador.
Exactly. And he did such a good job that the Bulgarian ruler, Boris the Thirst, wanted Formosus as his archbishop.
That's high praise.
Yeah, that's a huge endorsement.
But Pope Nicholas I, he wasn't on board with that.
No, he actually shut that down pretty quickly.
Citing some old church rules?
Yeah, he pointed to a canon from the Second Council of Nicaea.
Which basically said what?
That a bishop couldn't hold multiple sees at the same time.
So you couldn't be the bishop of 2 places?
Nope, because the idea was to prevent bishops from getting too much power.
Oh, that makes sense, right?
Yeah, they didn't want them building up their own little fiefdoms.
So even back then, they were worried about power getting concentrated.
Oh, absolutely. Power struggles within the church, this isn't a new thing.
So Formosus didn't just disappear after this, though.
No, he kept busy. He did a lot of traveling.
Where did you go?
To Constantinople, the heart of the Byzantine Empire.
That's a big trip back then.
It is. And he also went to the court of the Carolingian rulers.
Now, the Carolingians, they were the big power in Western Europe, right?
Yeah. And there he met Arnulf of Carinthia.
Who was he?
A Frankish king with ambitions for the Italian throne. Remember that name, because it's going to be important later.
So fast forward a few years to 875, and things start to get a little dicey for Formosus.
Yeah, things take a turn.
After Charles the Bald is crowned emperor, Formosus actually flees Rome.
Because he was afraid of Pope John VIII.
Why was that?
It was a power struggle.
Another one.
Right. And the next year, in 876, Pope John VIII calls a synod at Santa Maria Rotunda.
Like a church council.
Exactly. And he lays into Formosus and some of his allies.
What does he accuse them of?
Some pretty serious stuff. First, he claims Formosus turned the Bulgarians against the Holy See.
Which was what?
You know, the central administration of the Catholic Church.
Okay.
He argued that they wouldn't accept any other bishop from Rome.
Because of Formosus?
As long as he was alive, yeah.
So basically undermining papal authority on a big scale.
Big time. He was also accused of trying to usurp the papacy itself.
Wow.
And that he'd abandoned his bishopric in Porto and conspired against the state and Charles the Bald.
So basically, Formosus was a traitor.
Pretty much. And the result was he was excommunicated.
Ouch.
Yeah, a major fall from grace.
And it doesn't end there. There's another council, this time at Troy in 879. What happened there?
Well, the records are a bit fuzzy on this one. It seems like John VIII might have just confirmed the excommunication.
That was doubled down.
Exactly. But he also issued broader condemnations against people who were looting church property.
Interesting. So was Formosus even at this council?
There's one account that says he was there begging for forgiveness.
Trying to get back in good graces.
Yeah, swearing he would never return to Rome or his see in Porto.
And that he'd remain a layman.
Basically giving up his role in the church.
In exchange for having his excommunication lifted.
Right. But other accounts don't even mention him being there at all.
Oh, so it's unclear if he actually made this deal.
Yeah. And some say that John VIII actually confirmed his excommunication again at this council.
Oh, so he was really in hot water. How did Formosus ever come back from all of this?
Well, it seems when John VIII died in 882, things calmed down for Formosus.
I guess his enemies lost their power.
Right. And he was able to go back to being the Bishop of Porto.
And he stayed there until
891, when he was elected Pope. Talk about a comeback story.
That is quite a turnaround.
Shows you just how volatile things were in Rome.
So this whole conflict with John VIII sets the stage for what comes later. Now let's fast forward to the time leading up to the Cadaver Synod. Formosus has been pope for about 5 years before his death. What was the political situation like then?
Still a mess, to be honest. Remember Arnulf of Carinthia, the Frankish king?
Yeah.
Formosus had stayed in touch with him. But in 892, he crowned Lambert of Spoleto as co-ruler of the Holy Roman Empire.
What's the connection there?
Lambert's father, Guy III, had been crowned emperor by John VIII.
So Formosus was following precedent.
It seems so. Trying to keep things stable, you know.
But then he changes his mind, right?
Yeah. By 893, Formosus starts to worry about Guy III's aggression.
What does he do?
He does a complete 180 and invites Arnulf of Carinthia to invade Italy.
To become emperor?
Yeah, to take the crown from Lambert.
Wow. So Arnulf tries to invade, but fails.
Right. And then Guy III dies.
What happens next?
Formosus renews his invitation to Arnulf in 895.
Really doubling down on this plan.
I guess he really wanted Arnulf on the throne.
It's pretty risky inviting a foreign king to invade.
Yeah, it definitely made some enemies.
So in early 896, Arnulf finally makes it across the Alps.
Enters Rome, and Formosus crowns him as Holy Roman Emperor.
Success.
But both Arnulf and Formosus die within months of each other.
Oh, wow. So much happening so fast.
Yeah, lots of drama.
So who comes after Formosus?
Well, first it's Pope Boniface VI,
Okay.
but he only lasts 2 weeks.
2 weeks. That's got to be one of the shortest papacies ever.
It's up there.
So who's next?
Pope Stephen VI takes over. And right around the same time, Lambert of Spoleto and his mother, Empress Angeltrude, enter Rome.
Oh, that can't be good for Formosus's legacy.
And shortly after Stephen VI becomes Pope, the Cadaver Synod happens in January 897.
So everything is in place for this crazy event to unfold.
All the pieces are on the board.
So tell me, what actually happens at this synod? This is the part that I still can't wrap my head around.
Okay, so Stephen VI orders that Formosus's body be exhumed.
They dig him up.
Yep, and they bring him to the Lateran Basilica
The people see
for a trial.
a trial.
Yeah, just imagine this, right? A decomposing body being dragged into a courtroom.
That's such a strange, morbid image.
And then get this, they prop the corpse up on a throne.
A throne.
Yeah, they dress him up in his papal robes and everything.
Like he's still the Pope.
And to make things even weirder, a deacon is appointed to answer for Formosus.
So someone had to speak for the dead guy.
Yep. Someone had to answer the charges.
So what were the charges?
Well, there were 3 main ones. First, they said he had transmigrated sees.
What does that mean?
Basically that he was a bishop in one place, Quarto, and then became the Bishop of Rome.
Which was against the rules.
Right. Breaking that canon law we talked about.
Okay.
Second, perjury. They said he lied under oath.
Probably referring to that oath at the Council of Troyes.
Yeah, where he supposedly swore never to return to Rome.
What was the third charge?
That he had served as a bishop when he was actually a layman.
Again, because of that oath at Troyes.
Exactly.
So they're basically dredging up these old accusations.
And using them against a corpse.
Yeah, it seems pretty politically motivated.
And according to Luprand of Cremona, Stephen VI actually asked the corpse a question.
He talked to the dead body.
Yeah, he supposedly asked, why did you usurp the Roman see with such ambition after John VIII died?
Oh, come on.
It's almost funny, but also really creepy.
Yeah, it's a strange mix. So, unsurprisingly, the corpse was found guilty.
Of course.
What happened then?
They declared Formosus's entire papacy null and void.
So all his actions as pope, they didn't count.
Exactly. And then they went a step further. They stripped him of his papal vestments.
Not ceremonially.
Yep. And they cut off the 3 fingers of his right hand.
The ones he used for blessings.
Yep. And they invalidated all his ordinations.
Including?
Stephen VI's own ordination as a bishop.
Wow. He was really cutting off the branch he was sitting on.
Yeah, literally.
So what happened to Formosus's body after all this?
First, they buried him in a graveyard for foreigners.
Adding insult to injury, I guess.
But they dug him up again,
Really?
weighted him down, and threw him into the Tiber River.
Trying to get rid of him for good.
It seems so.
But it backfired, didn't it?
Oh, yeah, big time.
People were horrified by what Stephen VI had done.
The whole thing was just so brutal.
And then Formosus's body washed ashore,
And rumors started spreading about miracles.
connected to his body.
People were saying it was a sign,
That he was innocent.
that this whole thing was wrong.
So people revolted against Stephen VI.
Yeah, they deposed him and threw him in prison.
And then...
He was strangled in prison a few months later.
That's a pretty quick fall from power.
Yeah.
So what happened to Formosus's reputation?
Well, the next pope, Theodore II, he held another synod,
Okay.
and they annulled the Cadaver Synod.
They reversed everything.
Yeah, and they rehabilitated Formosus.
Restoring his good name.
And they reburied him in St. Peter's Basilica.
With full honors.
Absolutely.
Quite the turnaround.
But it didn't stop there. Pope John the Next, who came after Theodore II, he also nullified the Cadaver Synod at synods in Rome and Ravenna.
More church councils.
Yeah, and they ordered the records of the Cadaver Synod to be destroyed.
Trying to erase it from history.
And they excommunicated 7 cardinals who were involved.
Wow.
And to make sure nothing like this ever happened again, they banned any future trials of dead people.
I guess that makes sense. So for a long time, people thought that Formosus was really pro-Carolingian and that he was forced to crown Lambert of Spoleto.
Right, that Lambert basically made Stephen VI hold the Cadaver Synod out of revenge.
And to reassert his own claim to the empire.
Yeah, but that theory has some problems.
What makes you say that?
Well, as a historian named Joseph Durr pointed out, Lambert was actually at the Ravenna Council in 898, where they revoked the decrees of the Cadaver Synod.
Oh, so he was there when they overturned everything.
Yeah, and according to the records, he approved of it.
That doesn't sound like something he would do if he had orchestrated the whole thing.
Exactly. It just doesn't make sense.
So if Lambert wasn't behind it, who was?
Well, another historian, Girolamo Arnoldi, has a different theory.
Okay, what did he say?
He said Formosus didn't just favor the Carolingians, he actually had good relations with Lambert.
Up until a certain point.
Yeah. According to Arnoldi, what really messed things up was Lambert's cousin, Guy V of Spoleto.
What did he do?
He attacked Benevento and kicked out the Byzantines.
And that made Formosus nervous.
Yeah, so he turned to Arnulf for help.
So this shift in alliances, that's the key for Arnoldi.
Exactly.
So he's saying that Guy IV, who was in Rome with Lambert and Engeltrude in January 897, might have been the one who pushed for the Cadaver Synod.
Maybe he wanted to discredit Formosus and boost his own family's power.
It does seem like a more plausible explanation.
Right. It makes sense why Lambert would later approve of the annulment.
So it's not just a simple revenge story.
It's way more complicated than that.
It really shows how messy politics were back then.
Oh, yeah, just a constant struggle for power and influence.
And the papacy was right in the middle of it all.
So this Cadaver Synod, it's a pretty wild story.
It's hard to believe it actually happened.
Yeah, it's like something out of a movie.
A really dark, weird movie.
But it tells us a lot about the 9th century.
About power and legitimacy and how important the papacy was.
It's crazy to think that people were willing to go to such lengths.
To dig up a dead body and put it on trial.
Just to try and control the narrative.
Yeah. It's a pretty chilling thought.
And it makes you wonder, how far would people go today to shape history?
That's something to think about.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
And until next time, keep diving.